Elon Musk confronted by a woman veteran at a live press conference. What he does next shocks everyone. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. It was a crisp morning in Washington, D.C., the kind of day that hinted at the promise of new beginnings. The marble walls of the press conference room gleamed as the cameras clicked and flashed, capturing the chaos that often accompanied the presence of Elon Musk. The media had gathered in full force to hear the latest announcement from the billionaire tech mogul, the unveiling of a new venture that would reportedly change the face of technology and space exploration. In the years since he had become a household name, Musk had become synonymous with groundbreaking ideas. He was the man who wanted to send humans to Mars, build a sustainable future with electric cars, and, perhaps most impressively, make cutting-edge technology accessible for all. Musk, dressed in his usual casual attire, jeans and a black t-shirt, stepped up to the podium, adjusting his glasses before settling into the role of speaker. The reporters, many of whom had flown in from across the country, were eager to hear about his latest ambitions. He smiled as the room quieted, ready to deliver the speech that would leave his audience in awe. Today, we're on the cusp of something revolutionary. Musk began, his voice calm and measured, with just a hint of excitement. We have spent decades looking to the stars, but now it's time to look closer to home. We've made great strides in technology, and now we're working towards something that will change how we live on Earth. It's about sustainability, innovation, and moving humanity forward, starting with the transportation industry and, of course, our journey to Mars. Musk paused for a moment, allowing the reporters to digest his words. He knew his usual talks about electric vehicles and space missions were impressive, but today, he felt that this particular announcement would take him to a new level, one where his companies would be synonymous with not just progress, but the future itself. But then, from the back of the room, a voice suddenly cut through the air, interrupting Musk's carefully crafted speech. "Mr. Musk," a woman's voice rang out, steady and unwavering. "How can you stand here and talk about the future when the struggles of military families are ignored? My husband is deployed overseas. He's been gone for a year, and our children are growing up without him. Meanwhile, you talk about building electric cars and conquering Mars, but you've done nothing to address the very real struggles of those who have served this country. You've made billions, but you've turned a blind eye to the sacrifices of families like mine." The room froze, every head turned toward the source of the voice. There, standing in the back of the room, was a woman in military fatigues, her posture straight and resolute, her eyes locked on Musk. The press, initially caught off guard, sat in stunned silence. No one had expected this. The woman's presence was commanding, and her words were not just pointed. They were a call for action, one that demanded accountability from someone who had long been seen as an idol of technological innovation and progress. Musk, standing at the podium, looked momentarily stunned. It was clear that this was not part of the plan for today's conference. For a moment, there was an awkward pause, the air heavy with tension. The camera shutters paused, and the room became still as a hush descended over the gathered crowd. It wasn't every day that someone confronted a billionaire in front of the world's media. Yet, the woman, now identified as Samantha Blackwell, a military veteran herself, had done just that. Musk's initial response was not what anyone had expected. Rather than dismiss the interruption or ignore it, he seemed to gather his thoughts. He placed his hands on the podium, his fingers pressing down as if seeking stability. He had spent years navigating the intricacies of business, technology, and public scrutiny. But this was different. This wasn't about the future of space travel or electric vehicles. It was about the lives of people who had been forgotten in the rush to innovate. Musk began, his voice faltering for the first time. The words felt heavier than any of the technical jargon he was so accustomed to delivering. He glanced down at the notes he had prepared, but they suddenly felt irrelevant. Samantha's words cut deeper than any data or projected growth chart. "I hear you," he said slowly, making contact with the woman who stood unwavering. Her expression a mix of frustration and a deep, quiet plea for change. The room waited, hanging on his every word. He took a breath, realizing that this moment was larger than any of his previous achievements. He wasn't just facing an accusation. He was facing a fundamental question about his responsibility to the very people who had contributed to the nation he was now a part of shaping. "Thank you for speaking out," Musk continued, his tone sincere. "You're absolutely right. I've been so focused on technological innovation that I've overlooked the struggles of military families, and that needs to change." The response was unexpected. Samantha, whose face had been etched with years of hardship, now softened, though her eyes still held the weight of years of sacrifice. She had spoken not just for herself, but for countless others whose voices had not been heard. As the reporters shifted in their seats, eagerly waiting to see how the tech mogul would respond, Musk stood tall at the podium, a man who had just been confronted with the very human cost of progress. But Musk wasn't one to shy away from challenges, especially when they hit so close to home. He stood firm, his voice growing stronger as he spoke directly to the veteran. "I will do better. I promise you that this is something we will tackle head-on, and I won't back down until it's right. I will use the resources I have to ensure that those who have served this country and their families receive the support they deserve." The room was silent again, but this time, the silence wasn't filled with uncertainty. It was filled with the weight of Musk's words, a promise made in the face of a challenge that no one had anticipated. What had started as a standard press conference had now become the beginning of a new chapter, one that would see Elon Musk's companies not only pushing the boundaries of technology, but also confronting some of the country's most pressing social issues. And it all started with a single woman's courage to speak up. The room was suspended in time, as though the world had collectively held its breath. The harsh fluorescent lights above seemed to dim, and the usual hum of cameras clicking and microphones whirring disappeared, leaving an eerie silence. Musk stood at the podium, his gaze fixed on Samantha Blackwell, the woman who had dared to challenge him in front of the world. Samantha, for her part, stood firm, her military posture unyielding, her eyes burning with the intensity of someone who had lived through unimaginable struggles and now saw an opportunity to hold power accountable. It was clear that no one expected this kind of confrontation at a tech mogul's press conference. For the reporters in the room, this was not the run-of-the-mill corporate update they had come to expect from the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX. There was an authenticity in the room now, a rawness that hadn't been there before. Samantha's words were a challenge, not just to Musk, but to everyone in the room. She was speaking for the voiceless, veterans who had fought in wars, families that had been left behind, and countless others who felt ignored in the pursuit of futuristic goals. Musk's brilliance had been undisputed, but the question she posed was simple yet powerful. At what cost? Musk's mind raced. He wasn't unaccustomed to public scrutiny. His every move, every statement was often dissected by the press, scrutinized by those who viewed him as both a hero and a villain. But this was different. This wasn't about his ability to innovate or revolutionize an industry. This was a personal matter. He had always prided himself on being an advocate for progress, for the future, but now, standing in front of a woman who had experienced the sacrifices of war firsthand, he realized that the future he envisioned was missing something fundamental, something that couldn't be solved by technology alone. As the silence dragged on, Musk found himself searching for the right words. He wasn't sure why, but the veteran's accusation felt heavier than he had anticipated. His mind flickered back to his own family. His father, a man who had supported the military during his time in South Africa, had taught him about the value of service and sacrifice. Musk had always considered himself a man of action, one who could solve problems with innovative ideas, but what he hadn't accounted for was the emotional weight of the lives he was impacting, the lives of people who had given everything for their country. The reporters, sensing the gravity of the moment, exchanged glances. Some were unsure whether to continue with their questions, some waiting for the tech mogul to respond, others perhaps hoping that Musk would dismiss the challenge with a quick rebuttal. But no such words came. Instead, the cameras clicked sporadically, capturing the unease in the room. Samantha held her ground, the weight of her words lingering in the space between them. She wasn't expecting an immediate solution. She knew that nothing could be solved in a single conversation, but what she wanted, and what she had demanded, was acknowledgement, recognition that the men and women who fought for the nation often came home to a system that was ill-prepared to help them navigate the transition. That military families, the backbone of the nation's defense, were often left to fend for themselves while those at the top made decisions that seemed far removed from their reality. Musk's mind finally settled, and the fog of confusion lifted. He wasn't sure how to immediately solve the systemic issues that veterans and their families faced, but he realized with sudden clarity that this was no longer about Musk, the tech mogul, the man who revolutionized space travel and cars. This was about Musk, the human being, the one who had an obligation to listen and, more importantly, to act. "I'm sorry," Musk said, breaking the silence. His voice was quieter now, more introspective, as if he was choosing his words carefully. "I've spent so much of my life focused on changing the world, but I see now that I've overlooked something vital. I've been so caught up in solving the problems of the future, but I haven't paid enough attention to the people who have sacrificed their futures for the sake of our country. And that, I realize, is a huge oversight." The sincerity in his voice was palpable. Samantha's expression softened ever so slightly, but the resolve in her eyes remained. She had fought for this moment, not for herself, but for the countless others who had no voice, no platform, no one willing to listen to their struggles. She had been part of a system that had failed to live up to its promises, and today, she had used the opportunity to make sure that her voice, their voices, were heard. Musk continued, his eyes never leaving Samantha's. "I will do better," he promised, the words carrying weight. "I will use the resources and the influence that I have to ensure that the people who served this country and their families get the support they deserve. This won't be just another corporate initiative. This is personal, and I will make it my mission to address these issues, starting now." The reporters in the room were silent, perhaps in awe of the vulnerability Musk had just displayed. This was a moment few could have predicted. The titan of industry, the visionary who dreamed of interplanetary travel, was now committing to something far more grounded. He wasn't just talking about technological advancements or corporate profits. He was talking about the real human impact of his work. Samantha Blackwell, though still standing firm, allowed herself a slight nod. The response wasn't what she had expected. It was more. Musk's words were more than a simple apology. They were a commitment to change, a recognition that true progress didn't just lie in the stars, but in the people who lived on Earth, struggling with everyday challenges. "I appreciate your honesty," Samantha said, her voice steady. "I didn't expect this today, but I'm glad to hear it, and I'll be watching to see if you follow through." Her words were not a challenge, but a reminder. The press conference, which had begun as a showcase of Musk's latest business ventures, had been transformed into something far more significant. It had become a pivotal moment not just for Musk, but for the way the public would view the role of the corporate world in addressing social issues. And for the first time, the spotlight was not on the technology he created, but on the human need that had been ignored for far too long. As the cameras resumed clicking, and the reporters began scribbling notes, the weight of the conversation lingered in the room. The questions had shifted, the focus had shifted, and now the world was waiting to see what Musk would do next. The room was alive with activity as the immediate aftermath of Samantha Blackwell's confrontation began to unfold. The sharp sound of camera shutters clicked and flashed as reporters scrambled to capture every moment. The atmosphere was no longer dominated by the usual enthusiasm that accompanied Musk's grand revelations. Instead, there was a sense of contemplation, a quiet energy that lingered in the air. As Musk stood at the podium, his eyes still fixed on the woman who had dared to challenge him, the veteran's words had shaken him in a way that no press conference, no technical discussion about Mars or sustainable energy ever could. As the cameras and microphones buzzed, Musk took a deep breath and realized that this was not just another headline to manage. This was a turning point, both for himself and for his companies. He wasn't just the visionary entrepreneur who conquered new industries. Now, he was faced with a much deeper responsibility. "I hear you," Musk said again, his voice filled with a calm, deliberate resolve. The room hushed as everyone leaned in, waiting to see how he would respond to the challenge. There was something different in his demeanor, a kind of vulnerability that had rarely surfaced in his public life. He had built his empire on technology, on pushing boundaries and breaking norms, but this moment was one of those rare times when he recognized the deep human need that could not be solved by artificial intelligence or electric vehicles alone. "I've been so focused on creating a better future, one that solves the problems of energy, transportation, and even space exploration, that I haven't paid enough attention to the most fundamental issues here at home," Musk continued, his gaze now moving from Samantha to the room full of reporters. "The truth is, while we've made strides in so many areas, there are people, real people, who are left behind. The men and women who serve this country, their families, who sacrifice daily, deserve so much more than lip service." The words hung in the air as Musk's statement started to take root. The room remained silent, almost as if the journalists themselves were processing the gravity of what had just been said. Musk wasn't speaking in abstract terms anymore. He wasn't just a businessman spouting corporate jargon. He was speaking directly from the heart, acknowledging a gap he hadn't fully recognized until Samantha's words had shaken him to his core. He paused, letting the weight of his pledge settle in. "I am committed to using the resources in reach of my companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, to make a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and their families. These are not just empty promises. I will take action. I will ensure that we are part of the solution, not part of the problem." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Musk, known for his ambitious ventures, had just committed to something that went far beyond his typical business goals. For the first time, he was publicly aligning his vast fortune and influence with an issue deeply rooted in societal need, and it wasn't a matter of just writing a check or offering token gestures. He was pledging real, substantive involvement. The scope of his commitment was unprecedented. He was stepping into an area where business and social responsibility intersected on an intimate level. Samantha Blackwell, who had stood resolutely from the back of the room, now allowed herself a moment to breathe. She wasn't sure if she had expected this level of response. Musk had just made a public declaration, but words alone would not be enough. What would truly matter was what followed. She had fought for this moment, not for herself, but for the thousands of families who silently struggled, hoping that one day someone would step up. Musk, for all his wealth and power, was the person who could move the needle on issues that had been ignored for far too long. But the real question was whether this commitment would evolve into lasting, tangible change. Musk's words were filled with urgency, but they were also marked by a deep introspection. "I've always believed that technology can change the world, but I see now that it must do so in a way that uplifts everyone," he continued. "I've been fortunate to have been in a position to innovate, to solve big problems, but the truth is, this country's veterans are facing problems that are just as pressing as any space mission or electric car innovation. And while I can't solve everything overnight, I will start here, and I will do everything I can to make sure that we address these issues head-on. The press conference, once intended to showcase the latest milestones in Musk's business empire, had taken a sharp turn. Reporters, still adjusting to the unexpected shift, began jotting down notes feverishly, the tension in the room palpable as they realized the magnitude of what Musk had just pledged. There were murmurs of disbelief, and some even began questioning how Musk could possibly implement such a promise. Was he serious? Could he really use his companies, known for revolutionizing technology, to address the deeply entrenched issues facing military families? And if so, what would that look like? Samantha, meanwhile, had her doubts as well. She had heard many empty promises before, many politicians, CEOs, and leaders who had promised change but failed to follow through. She had seen the systemic failures that so many veterans faced. An endless cycle of bureaucracy, underfunded programs, and a lack of tangible support. Could Musk be different? Could his resources and technological prowess actually create real solutions? She was unsure, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Musk continued, his voice steady as he laid out his plan. The first step will be the creation of a veteran-focused task force within my companies. This task force will be charged with identifying the most pressing needs of military families and finding ways to address them through the technologies and expertise we have at our disposal. I won't stop at a corporate donation or a symbolic gesture. We are going to partner with veterans organizations, medical professionals, and government agencies to create lasting solutions. He leaned forward, his eyes now scanning the room, meeting the gaze of the reporters, who had started to whisper among themselves. We will begin by focusing on healthcare and mental health services for veterans, but that's just the beginning. We will look at employment opportunities, housing solutions, and even educational support for the children of military families. My goal is not just to provide temporary relief, but to create long-term, sustainable changes. Samantha listened intently, her arms crossed over her chest, as she weighed his words carefully. This was the moment when the world would be watching. Musk had just made a public pledge, and now the real test would be whether he could turn that promise into action. She wasn't sure if she believed it entirely yet, but she knew this was the beginning of something important. The pressure was on, not just for Musk, but for the entire nation. If this initiative failed, it would be seen as another broken promise, but if it succeeded, it could truly change the lives of countless veterans and their families. Musk's voice grew even more resolute as he concluded, "This isn't just a business decision. This is a personal commitment. I've been given a platform, a chance to make a real difference, and I intend to use it. I won't rest until this is no longer a problem that can be ignored." For a moment, the silence was replaced by a new kind of energy. There were still doubts, of course, but there was also a renewed sense of possibility. Musk had made a promise, and now the world would wait to see how he would fulfill it. The conference ended, but the conversation had only just begun. In the days that followed Musk's impromptu pledge to address the struggles of military families, the media landscape was abuzz. The headlines were a mixture of surprise, skepticism, and cautious optimism. Some praised Musk for his willingness to publicly acknowledge the shortcomings in his focus and for making a personal commitment to change. Others, however, questioned the sincerity of his words, wondering whether this was just another grand gesture that would eventually fade into the background. Samantha Blackwell, the woman who had confronted Musk during the press conference, found herself at the center of the storm overnight. She had become a symbol of something far bigger than herself. She was now the face of a movement that had resonated deeply with people across the nation. Military families, veterans, and even those who had never served in the military, but understood the broader implications of Musk's pledge, rallied behind her. On social media, her name trended for days. Interviews flooded in from news outlets, podcasts, and talk shows. It was overwhelming at first, but Samantha remained grounded. She hadn't expected any of this. She had only stood up for the men and women who had given so much and received so little in return. For her, this was never about fame or attention. It had always been about ensuring that veterans and their families were seen and heard. But now, as the media spotlight turned on her, she realized that this was her chance to push for real, lasting change. It wasn't just Musk who had the power to create that change. It was the collective voice of the people who had been invisible for so long. The pressure was on, and she knew she couldn't let this moment slip away. Meanwhile, Elon Musk was coming to terms with the enormity of the commitment he had made. The shift in focus was palpable. Musk had been used to leading initiatives that pushed the boundaries of technology, solving problems that seemed to belong to a distant future, but now he was navigating a completely different terrain. The work of improving the lives of military families was not something that could be solved with a flashy new invention or a breakthrough in artificial intelligence. This was about human lives, real people, and entrenched societal issues that spanned decades. The first step, Musk realized, was to move quickly but carefully. He didn't want to be known as the man who promised change and then failed to deliver. He had built his reputation by being a disruptor, someone who didn't shy away from challenges. But the challenges he now faced were different from anything he had encountered before. This wasn't about engineering solutions for Mars. This was about people who had been let down by the systems that were supposed to support them. The task before him wasn't about making things more efficient or technologically advanced. It was about making them human, compassionate, and equitable. To that end, Musk convened a team from across his companies, gathering experts in healthcare, veteran advocacy, employment, and housing. He didn't just want a task force that would look at the problem from a distance. He wanted one that would involve veterans in the process, that would speak with the families directly to understand their needs. Samantha Blackwell was invited to participate, not just as a spokesperson, but as an active member of the team. She would serve as a liaison between the veteran community and Musk's companies. The first meetings were tense. Musk, though undeniably brilliant, was still learning the intricacies of veteran care and the deep-rooted issues that military families faced. For every solution the team proposed, there seemed to be a counterpoint: logistical challenges, financial constraints, the sheer scale of the problem. But Musk, ever the problem solver, was determined to find a way forward. His companies had built rockets that could land back on Earth. Surely they could find a way to help those who had served the country in much less dramatic ways. "We're not going to reinvent the wheel here," Musk said during one of the task force's early meetings. "We're going to make sure that the programs that exist are actually working for the people who need them. If they're not, we'll create something new, but we have to start by talking to those who are directly impacted by this." Samantha, sitting across from Musk, felt a growing sense of hope. His approach was direct and hands-on. He didn't just want to fund programs from a distance. He wanted to be involved. There was a humility in his words, a recognition that his vast wealth and influence could be used to shine a light on issues that were often ignored. The challenge was monumental, but the stakes were just as high. The team spent weeks collecting data, speaking with veterans, and identifying gaps in existing services. They quickly realized that while there were many organizations dedicated to helping veterans, they were often underfunded or disjointed, working in silos rather than collaborating to provide comprehensive care. The group worked tirelessly, developing a list of priority areas: mental health services, better access to healthcare, affordable housing, and creating job opportunities for veterans transitioning back into civilian life. Musk was particularly passionate about mental health, a subject that hit close to home. His own struggles with stress and anxiety in the high-pressure world of entrepreneurship had given him a unique perspective on the importance of mental health care. He was determined to ensure that veterans didn't just receive the medical care they needed, but the emotional and psychological support that would allow them to reintegrate into society and lead fulfilling lives. "We can't expect veterans to just move on from their service," Musk said, a note of frustration in his voice. "They need real support systems. We need to normalize the conversation around mental health and make sure that the services are there when they need them. They've given enough. It's time for the country to give back." The more Musk engaged with the team and veterans organizations, the more he came to realize that the problem wasn't simply about a lack of resources. It was about a lack of attention. These issues weren't sexy. They didn't generate headlines like a new Tesla or a SpaceX launch. They were the quiet, everyday struggles of families who had sacrificed so much, and yet, their needs often went unnoticed in the national conversation. At the same time, the public's reaction to Musk's pledge was a mixed bag. Veterans organizations were cautiously optimistic, but wanted to see tangible results. Skeptics questioned whether Musk's involvement was genuine, or whether this was just a PR move. Critics argued that one man, no matter how wealthy or influential, couldn't fix the deeply entrenched issues facing veterans. But there was another side to the story. Those who believed in Musk's ability to make change, who saw him not just as a businessman, but as a man who had the potential to turn the spotlight on problems that had long been ignored. Samantha, too, struggled with her own doubts. While she appreciated Musk's commitment, she had seen too many promises made by powerful figures that never came to fruition. She had seen how easily people could become distracted by the next big thing, the next headline, and lose sight of the real work that needed to be done. But there was something about Musk's approach that felt different. Perhaps it was his relentless drive, his unwillingness to accept the status quo. Perhaps it was the way he insisted on diving deep into the issues, bringing veterans directly into the process, and making them part of the solution. It wasn't just about providing answers from the top down. It was about collaborating with those who had the most at stake. As the days turned into weeks, the task force's plan began to take shape. Musk had made it clear that this was not going to be a quick fix. The problems were complex, and the solutions would take time. But with each passing day, there was a growing sense of purpose. The task force knew that they were just beginning, but for the first time in a long while, the veterans who had been ignored for so long were beginning to feel like their voices were finally being heard. The shift in focus from technology and space exploration to the very real struggles of military families was profound, and with Musk at the helm, the world would soon see if this was just a passing moment or the beginning of lasting change. Elon Musk's decision to establish a dedicated veterans task force marked the beginning of a new era, both for his companies and for military families across the nation. Musk had always been known for his audacious goals, sending rockets into space, building electric cars, and creating sustainable technologies, but this was a new frontier, one that had nothing to do with outer space or electric vehicles. It had everything to do with addressing the struggles faced by military families, an issue that had been largely overlooked by many in positions of power, including Musk himself. Yet, now that he had made his commitment, the task was monumental. It wasn't just about providing temporary relief, but about crafting long-term solutions that would change the lives of veterans, their families, and their communities. Musk wasted no time putting his plan into motion. Within a week of the press conference, he convened a meeting with senior leaders from Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. The purpose was clear: create a task force that would lead the charge in addressing the challenges military families faced. Musk didn't want to merely acknowledge the issue. He wanted his companies to be at the forefront of finding innovative solutions. He understood that, for his pledge to hold any weight, it needed to be backed by action, and action was exactly what he intended to deliver. The room was filled with the usual top-tier minds from Musk's empire: scientists, engineers, business strategists, and policy experts. But this time, the conversation wasn't about rockets or autonomous cars. It was about how they could use their considerable resources and expertise to address the needs of those who had served their country. The meeting was charged with a new energy, one that felt different from the usual corporate buzz. The work ahead was personal, and it would demand something more than just clever engineering or cutting-edge technology. Samantha Blackwell, the veteran who had confronted Musk in Washington, D.C., was invited to participate in this meeting, not as an observer, but as a key member of the task force. Her first-hand knowledge of the struggles faced by military families gave her a unique perspective that could help guide the group's decisions. Musk had made it clear that he wanted veterans at the table, helping shape the solutions from the ground up. "We've been so focused on innovation that we've overlooked the human side of our work," Musk had said when he personally reached out to Samantha. "You know what needs to be done. I want you to help us make it happen." Samantha, still adjusting to her newfound role, arrived at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, California, with a mixture of skepticism and cautious hope. She had spent years navigating the bureaucratic maze of veteran care, dealing with the overwhelming paperwork, underfunded programs, and fractured systems. She wasn't sure that even Musk's vast fortune could fix the systemic problems that plagued veterans, but she also recognized an opportunity to influence real change. She knew that if anyone could make a difference, it was someone like Musk, someone who had a track record of shaking up industries and challenging the status quo. As the meeting began, Musk immediately took charge as expected. His focus was laser-sharp, his usual eccentricities tempered by a sense of urgency. "We need to identify the most pressing problems and then figure out how to use our resources and knowledge to solve them," he said. "This isn't about doing the bare minimum or making a donation here and there. This is about creating lasting impact. I want to know where we can make the most difference, and I want to do it quickly." The team quickly got to work, breaking down the issues that veterans faced into key categories: mental health services, healthcare access, housing, employment, and education for military children. Each category was a monumental task in itself, and Musk wasn't content with simply tackling one or two areas. His ambition was clear. He wanted to make sure that every aspect of military life, from deployment to reintegration, was supported in a meaningful way. "We've got a great team here, and we all know what we're good at," Musk continued. "But we also need to listen to veterans, hear their stories, and make sure we're not missing anything. If we're going to solve these problems, we need to do it in a way that doesn't just throw money at the issue, but actually solves it." Samantha nodded, impressed by the straightforward approach. Musk wasn't just paying lip service to the problem. He was serious. The conversation shifted to practical matters: how to allocate resources, which organizations to partner with, and how to measure the success of their efforts. Samantha spoke up, offering her insights into the gaps in existing programs. "The VA, Veterans Affairs, is overwhelmed," she said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of years of frustration. "There are so many resources available on paper, but they don't always reach the people who need them. What's missing is a clear, streamlined system that connects veterans to the services they need, without all the red tape." The team listened intently. Musk absorbed her words with a seriousness that made it clear he wasn't just trying to fix a broken system. He wanted to build something new, something more effective. The team began brainstorming ways that they could leverage Tesla's data systems, SpaceX's technology, and Neuralink's capabilities to improve the process of connecting veterans with the right services. Could AI be used to track mental health trends and provide personalized care? Could Tesla's electric vehicle infrastructure be repurposed to offer affordable transportation for veterans in remote areas who couldn't access healthcare? Could Neuralink help improve treatments for PTSD by creating new ways to understand and address the brain's response to trauma? Musk's mind raced with possibilities, and though some ideas seemed wildly ambitious, the sense of possibility was infectious. It wasn't just about tackling individual problems. It was about rethinking the entire system. As the conversation continued, the task force started to form its vision: to create a comprehensive, integrated approach to veteran care, one that combined cutting-edge technology with compassionate support. By the end of the day, the team had outlined a preliminary plan. They would start by building a network of support centers that would act as both physical and digital hubs for veterans. These centers would combine traditional services with innovative technologies, such as telehealth platforms powered by AI, to provide veterans with real-time, personalized care. They would also focus on job training programs that would help veterans transition into civilian careers, while also providing housing assistance and education resources for military families. Samantha was exhausted, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she saw a way forward, a way that was grounded in innovation and, just as importantly, grounded in listening to the people who needed help the most. Musk, too, seemed energized. The usual fire in his eyes was replaced by something deeper, an understanding that this project wasn't just another business venture. It was a calling. He had been given a platform to make a difference, and now he was determined to use it to change the lives of people who had been forgotten for far too long. As the task force wrapped up their meeting, Musk turned to Samantha. "This is just the beginning," he said, a look of determination on his face. "We're going to do everything we can to make sure that veterans get the care and the recognition they deserve. We're not going to stop until we've made real, lasting change." For the first time in a long while, Samantha allowed herself to believe that real change was possible. It was a daunting task, but with the right people, the right resources, and the right mindset, it was no longer an impossible dream. This time, she believed, Musk wasn't just talking. He was going to act, and that gave her hope.